Welcome to my capstone on culturally responsive teaching practices that promote student engagement. My purpose statement being to examine teacher reports of teaching practices within culturally responsive teaching that promote increased student engagement in a diverse urban high school. The research question: what are teacher reports of teaching practices within culturally responsive teaching that promote increased student engagement in a diverse urban high school? My three sub questions were related to teaching and learning practices, classroom management practices, and inclusive practices, all within culturally responsive teaching that promote increased student engagement in a diverse urban high school. Three themes emerged from my literature. The first one being culturally responsive teaching strategies, the second being increased student engagement, and the final theme being teachers' abilities to reflect, accept feedback, and adjust or implement changes. In every one study, they used photo voice and semi structured interviews. My sampling methods were purposeful and convenient sampling. I had three participants in this study. The first one being a special education Hispanic male in education 6 years in an urban district for three. A science teacher, a Caucasian male in education 9 years in an urban district, all 9 years, and another science teacher, a Caucasian female in education 23 years in an urban district for 20. My categories: I started off categorizing first in my interviews, and I took the categories that I developed and broke them down and ended up with 81 different codes. My themes and major findings were the same. The first one being developing and maintaining positive connections with students, developing relationships, developing rapport with students, and building on those relationships. Second, designing and implementing inclusive classroom or learning spaces, having a classroom with expectations, with structure, where students feel valued, they feel safe, they feel welcomed. If all those things combine, it will increase student engagement. Creating and integrating a diverse, inclusive curriculum, having culturally relevant materials, having culturally relevant lessons, bringing student choice, having different options. All these things would increase student engagement. And finally, fostering culturally responsive engagement, things such as active learning, collaboration. Collaboration could also go into that curriculum, but in interviews, teachers felt collaboration, having students working with different types, different students each time, seeing different viewpoints, having students, even if they disagree, respect others' point of view is big and increases engagement. Recommendations for this study: teachers should have culturally responsive training and implement it. Teachers should design a classroom that is flexible, structured, and encourages community building. Teachers incorporating student voice and feedback. The recommendation I would choose for an action plan would be my first one: teachers having culturally responsive training and implementing it, going over topics such as cultural competence, addressing biases, fostering diversity, understanding various culturally responsive teaching practices, with the ultimate goal being to improve the current curriculum with the incorporation of cultural relevance, all of this combining to promote student engagement. These steps would be the tasks that would be in this action plan. So the first one being culturally responsive teaching training, learning what culturally responsive teaching is, learning culturally responsive teaching strategies, implementing those strategies, collaborating with colleagues, learning what works, what's not working with them, curriculum writing, improving the curriculum, and feedback and overall reflection. Those would go in these tasks right here. This time frame would be over 8 weeks. People involved, a third party that has expertise and experience in culturally responsive training or teaching, professional development personnel, and high school teachers grades 9 through 12. In this study, strengths were my participants provided me with enough data. That data was very similar to what I learned from my literature. I was able to align my themes or major takeaways with multiple guidelines of UDL and culturally responsive teaching. Challenges were a limited sample size, only 3 participants, scheduling interviews, and the language was confusing to some of my participants, so I had to explain. Two big takeaways: some teachers might be using culturally responsive teaching but don't know it or realize it. There's certain things that I'm implementing already in my classroom, but there's always room for growth or improvement. What I learned: additional culturally responsive teaching strategies, that UDL and culturally responsive teaching share common goals, and that these strategies used can benefit students in any school or of any demographic. And here are my references.